For the past week, I've been playing Mafia Definitive Edition, and if I could sum it up in one word, it would probably be this: overrated. Now, before people, they start jumping down my throat, they say 24, it's a fantastic game, 24, it's one of the best games of the year, 24 to this, 24 that. Let me explain first before people start freaking out. I'm a big fan of the series. I was a big fan of the original Mafia 2 that came out on the PS3. I played the hell out of that. I loved Vito Scaletta. I loved the story within that game. To me, it's the best game within the series. I was excited for this game because it was going to be the main entry, the first entry into that series, and I was excited to play it because of how many positive things I had heard about the game, how the legacy that game had in being the first game in one of my favorite video game series of all time, and that's obviously the Mafia series. And I was just interested to see a traditional mob-based Mafia game, and for like 3/4 of the game, it didn't let me down. I loved the story of the game. It was fantastic up until the third act. What the fuck happened in the third act? Let me kind of narrow the game down into two different parts, right? Two very basic parts: the gameplay of the game and the story of the game. Now, the gameplay of the game, I didn't like pretty much after, I think, the first act, where you're kind of introduced to the game, you do the first mission of the game, and then you're introduced into the mob and things of that nature. I was not happy about the gameplay. I didn't like how your character was controlled. I didn't like how the driving was very, very heavy-handed. And yes, I'm very aware that these are cars from the 1920s and the 1930s. This is pre-World War II vehicles. They suck. They're supposed to suck. I get it. However, it doesn't make it a good game mechanic. It makes it obnoxious to drive in that game. It's obnoxious to drive in that game. I had to make it go from a simulation to regular, and that made it feel like normal. But even on regular, even on that driving, the driving was still obnoxious. Let me take you to one part of the video game that everybody complains about the driving. That is the race that's in the game. The only race that's in the game, as a matter of fact. That part of the game has you driving a very specific route in the race with a car that is super uncontrollable, to the point where that vehicle can spin out at a moment's notice. It doesn't perform as fast as other cars in certain situations and certain stretches of that race, even though apparently you're supposed to have a similar car to everybody else. And the AI drives, I wouldn't say almost a perfect route within that game, but it's pretty obnoxious how flawless the AI is in that game, and how flawless you have to then be to counteract how obnoxious the AI is within that game. It's very obnoxious to play the race part of the game, and then the other overworld parts of the game where you're just driving around and slamming into shit if you have it on regular or simulation, and then your car doesn't, and then specific cars don't perform as fast as other cars. Driving in the game, regardless, is obnoxious. But once you get out of the driving and you get towards the shooting is obnoxious. The AI is stupid, but also incredibly smart in the sense of it will flank, but there's no audio cues for them like footsteps or walking past you and trying to flank you. And then on top of that, there's no enemies on your minimap, so you have no idea where they are, and sometimes you'll get flanked by somebody and then die. Other times, AI, I experienced this constantly in the last mission. AI will just pop out of nowhere. Enemies will pop out of nowhere, and they'll just load into the game randomly, and then they'll destroy you. By the time I was through with the first act, getting deep into the second act, I had enough of the gameplay. I was not playing the game for the gameplay anymore. I was playing it specifically for the story, and this is when the second half of the game really lets me down. But before I get started on that, let me address another thing that's within the game. The polish is shoddy or shitty. And it's probably because of the pandemic, obviously, but the polish is so bad. I mean, we're talking ghosting. We're talking, again, pop-ins with the AI. and just a whole bevy of performance issues. Like, there's clipping, I don't know what it's called, but like sometimes, and I noticed it in like the first scene, where it's like when it goes from scene to scene, it sometimes has this like clip or glitch or whatever it is. It is bad, some of the glitches that happen within this game, and how consistent they are, and how obvious these problems continuously become without the game, where they just, like, it's not fixed, like, they're just consistently in the game, and it feels really unpolished. Continuing forward with other problems, let's then address the main one. The story. Once again, fantastic for like the first 2.5–2/3 of the game, but when it gets to that third part of the game, the final act, the writing just becomes terrible. So let me contextualize this. Your character, Tommy Angelo, and Polly, his friend, essentially for some weird reason that hasn't been described at all up until that point in the game, they're tired of being in the mob, or they want money to get out of the mob and disappear, especially Polly. Now, for some weird reason, I have no idea why they just don't talk to the Don, who seems to be all about family and loyalty and things of that nature. I'm pretty sure he would just like be like, yeah, just go ahead and go on and do your own thing, or maybe not, I don't know. Regardless, Polly and Tom go behind the Don's back, who preaches order and loyalty within the first couple of minutes of the game, and how to not act like wild animals and not to, you know, go behind his back. He preaches that within the first couple of minutes, or really one of the first really important parts of the game, and then they go on and betray him, and then they're then surprised that he retaliated against them by not only sending Sam to kill Polly, but then to kill Tom. And Tommy, at that point where Sam is talking to him, he talks to him, there's this fantastic monologue with Sam, and how he talks about how Tommy and Polly betrayed the gang, the mob, for a bunch of money. They betrayed the family for money, and he throws it at him. He's like, this is what you betrayed the family for. And it was great, and it was fantastic. And Tommy was complaining about how Sam had betrayed Tommy and Polly instead of betraying the mob. And it's like, no shit, he's not gonna betray the mob. That's not what he's supposed to do. He's gonna betray you. I don't know why you two morons betrayed the mob, especially when you guys should have just done what you should have done correct, instead of bringing in the Dawn into your bank robbery, because it's like the mission itself, the event was easy. It's like, why not just cut him a slice and then take your piece of the pie to the Dawn and then go after that? But of course, Tommy and Polly, they just fucked it up. Tommy just becomes a terrible character. I couldn't care less that he died at the end of the game. Boo-hoo for him and his family. Couldn't care less. Don't really care. But the game's ending was disappointing. The gameplay was disappointing. All of the motivation that I had for the game was embedded in the story, and by that point in the game, I wasn't like the payoff of the story wasn't good enough for me. It was disappointing. So yes, the game is overrated, but I liked parts of it. I liked the 2/3 of the game before Tommy and Polly betray the mob for some dumb reason. And I know the reason was that they wanted to get out. Just talk to the Dawn. It's like, there's plenty of other reasons and ways to get out of the game. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been 24. Remember to like, comment, favorite, and subscribe for more. Until my next video, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.